All right, I've got my coffee. It's Saturday morning. I actually rested last night, which is insane considering I am usually working till about 2 in the morning from 9 to 2. But yesterday was one of those days where I realized if I had hit the comic pages, I would have possibly just hit complete burnout. And I talk about this a lot on the channel where, in order to get comic books done, if you have a day job, you basically there's two scenarios for cartoonists that I've witnessed, even with indie cartoonists, and a lot of people aren't frank and honest about it. But scenario number one, you're married to somebody who's really wealthy. That's like that. Honestly, I've met so many cartoonists who they knock out comics. They're really profoundly dedicated to comics, and they're married to somebody super wealthy, and that's how they do it. Like, meaning they aren't going to be like the sole provider in a scenario. If you're a person who has to do breadwinning or actually bring money to the table for your family or something like that. And by the way, that's not just for cartoonists, that's for writers too, right? Like, there's a lot of writers that have the luxury, maybe they're in a situation where they don't have to earn, and then they can just dedicate themselves full time to maybe they're the stay at home parent or whatever in a scenario, and in that case that's cool. That's a huge job, it's an important job. But my point being, I have met a lot of cartoonists throughout my time who aren't open about that kind of fact. But number two, if you're not in that scenario, you're in my scenario where, until comics start bringing in mass income, you're doing comics out of passion and love, even if they're paid. And then in that case, you're basically doing comics on the side of your day job and your other responsibilities. And both cases, regardless of which scenario you're in, and there's also some people who maybe their first comic exploded and they're the exception, but in general, that's the two kinds of cartoonists I often meet. One who usually are very more secretive about their kind of scenario. I'm just throwing it out there because it's something I've found kind of, I don't know, interesting that people kind of don't talk about those two scenarios. But anyhow, my point being, I'm in that second scenario, that second category where I am an art director by day. That's my full time job. And then when I'm not art directing or anything like that, I'm working from home on comics. And here's another thing that's unique and cool about my situation is I have when I'm working on comics, my wife is super supportive of it and helps with watching the kid and just doing things around the house. And with a deadline like the one I'm working on right now, it's insanity, the way that works. But anyhow, so what was I going to say? Oh yeah. Okay. So in a scenario like mine, where you're having to do that, you're basically, I think actually in both scenarios, you're always going to be skating the writing possible burnout, where, you know what I mean? It's going to be like a burnout kind of scenario where you are going to have to do work on top of work and ride the edge of potential burnout in order to get work done. And I think it's just one of those scenarios where you're always going to be kind of juggling more work than you think is possible. Regardless of the scenario you're in, you're gonna have to kind of ride the edge of burnout. And yesterday, this is one of the cool things about my wife is really awesome in the sense that yesterday she noticed that I was on that point where I was going to be exhausted. I was not going to be making comics very effectively, and deadline or not, I can't afford to burn out. And so I ended up going to sleep, which is funny because I'm such a workaholic that I was just oh my gosh, I feel bad about sleeping. And but my wife was no, dude, take the night off, go to bed. And so I went to sleep, and that was kind of the scenario. So anyhow, there we go. We have now two things that we have to do like today. One is all day I'm planning on basically doing nothing but roughs and thumbnails for a story. I think that my brain is kind of all over the place. So anyhow, what was I saying? I lost track for what I was saying. Anyhow, so basically the thing that I was trying to say, and I lost track for a second there. What I'm going to be doing today is working on roughs for the next pages of Not Death But Love, the strange, mysterious case or supernatural story of Elizabeth Barrett Browning. And while I'm working on it, I'm planning on doing a lot of research. So hopefully today should be a fun kind of research stream where we'll basically look up different scenarios of Elizabeth Barrett Browning going out in public in Italy, in a public market, and kind of shopping around. And hopefully like through this, like it's going to develop the story and get the character from like currently they're at like Casa Guidi, and then which is their flat basically in Italy, and then move on from there. But I haven't even mentioned at the top like who I am. So I'm Joshua Kemble. I've been a graphic designer and illustrator for about about over 20 years. And I've been an art director for about 8. And what I do on these streams, like I mentioned at the top, like I'm doing this on top of my day job and kind of, obviously being a dad and all that fun stuff. And I'm going to be working on a graphic novel for West Margin Publishing, which is a really cool opportunity and exciting thing. But that's kind of what I'm going to be working on. And I'm feeling like my brain is being distracted. Like, I don't know why. Today, I'm so rested that I feel like my focus is split. And generally, I'm really good at like having a split focus. But today, my brain is like all over the place in direction. So I apologize if like if my streaming isn't on point as I guess it usually is. The other thing that I was going to say is I'm probably going to be live streaming till about 11 when Mr. Gary Hodges of Dinosaurs versus Marsbots fame will be. He's a great cartoonist. You guys should all be following him. And in honor of Gary, his live stream is usually at 11 o'clock on every Saturday, and I am not going to compete with that time. So what I'm going to do is go till 11, and then I'm going to be watching Gary's stream. The kind of work that I'm doing right now won't make for like really conducive conversation because I'm going to be pulling open a lot of references. We're going to be going through different thumbnails and doing historical research. And that doesn't make for like a lot of like good back and forth live during stuff. But anyhow, so that's basically what we're getting at. So anyhow, like what else? My brain is all over the place. Okay, so what else was it that I was gonna say? Okay. Sorry. Wow, my brain. Okay. Oh yeah. Okay. So we also have Jacob's Apartment. I have to plug my books that are currently out, and then we'll get into the stuff that my brain is getting distracted with, which is like work. I got to get this stuff done. So basically, we have Jacob's Apartment, which is my graphic novel. The best explanation I can give of it is if you took Eternal Sunshine for the Spotless Mind and you took something like Ghost World and you put the two in a blender and then you drank that beverage and you liked the flavor, this book would be right up your alley. And then you also have Two Stories, which is a graphic novel about faith and mental illness, and it's my autobiographical story. And both of those books are kind of like currently able to come out. So anyhow, those are both available on Amazon, and again, like if I'm kind of getting derailed as I'm live streaming, it's just like it's Saturday. There's a lot of stuff going in the house, and so my brain gets easily distracted. But anyhow, so let's get into the comic and the drawing and all that fun stuff. So yesterday, I think it was yesterday or it was Thursday on stream, I finished this page, and you guys will probably remember this. I had to revise it. So I did do this revision last night super quick before I went into the other pages, which is basically just something simple, which is taking a kissing sequence and just kind of closing the eyes of a character. So that's something that I went ahead and took care of. And then page 27 is what we'll be thumbnailing today. So I've done some research and already broken down the script, but let me go ahead and explain the format of this. Basically, I'll be working over here, and then down here is the section of script that I'll be working from. So let's go ahead and find the script, and I think the script will be here. Got it. Okay, so the script is page 27. So where it says, let's see here. Okay, so let's read the script that we're going to be working out. And this is, again, just for page 27. Currently in the story, I'm doing this to recap to get my brain in the right space as well. So in the story, we're introduced to Elizabeth Barrett Browning's brother, who at the very beginning of the story drowns at sea. Then we flash forward to the Browning's residence, the Barrett's residence on 50 Wimpole Street, where we're introduced to Elizabeth Barrett Browning. And we find out that she's been on laudanum, like depressed in her room, like suffering from some kind of illness. Art by Galen just hopped in and said, "Good morning." Good morning, Art by Galen. And from that point, we meet Wilson, her maid, who is kind of caretaking for her as she's going, as she's like recovering and kind of dealing with the depression over losing her brother at sea. We're introduced to the fact that it appears that she's having a romantic relationship with Robert Browning, who is, and it's a relationship that's not approved by her father. So we meet Mr. Barrett, her father, and we find out that like he has like a caring like he cares for his daughter, but he's definitely a very controlling person who doesn't approve of their relationship. We then see Robert basically come get Elizabeth Barrett Browning, send her a letter, and basically say, "Hey, we're eloping." And they elope. They go to a church. They get married at the church, and then basically now she sends a letter to her father saying, "Hey, we've eloped. I know you don't approve of this." And the father gets so mad that he pulls her portrait off of the wall. Then we flash forward to the ocean, where there's a steamship that's basically traveling through the sea. And taking them from England to Italy. And then we're taken to Italy to Casa Guidi, where once they've arrived in Italy on the steamship, we also find out that Elizabeth has a fear of being on the ocean because she's lost her brother. And then we're taken to a steamship. After the steamship, they arrive in Italy, and they're at Casa Guidi, and we finally see Elizabeth like relaxed, and her and Robert having like a romantic moment in their place. And then from there, we are now like done with the romance scene. And now we're going to be introduced to this page, and let's go through the script. So that kind of gets us currently where we are. Let's get into the script and kind of break it down. As you can see, I've done some of the script breakdown already. This is a little bit of work I did off stream. And then we'll see how far we can get before 11, because 11 o'clock is going to be my cutoff time. So here it says, dressed in cooler, lighter clothing than she wore in England, Wilson navigates. Art by Galen said, "Oh, fun, starting a new page today." Yeah, so what I'm trying to do with this is probably thumbnail and rough like 6 pages, and then I'll be doing the proceeding to do the comic in like 6-page chunks. And I think that's a pretty fair way to go about it. Let's see. So, dressed in cooler, lighter clothing than she wore in England, Wilson navigates an open-air food market like a pro, a basket on her arm. She moves from stall to stall, inspecting the wares and chatting with the vendors. So, we're going to have to do like an open-air market in Italy, with Elizabeth strolling behind Wilson, clutching a fan. Wilson says, "Buongiorno, quanto." That's my horrible pronunciation of Italian. Good morning. How much is basically what that translates to. So Wilson's basically like, we see that she's kind of familiarized herself a little bit with Italy. And she is basically going to be shopping for different wares in the open market. A flushed Elizabeth fans herself and seeks shade beneath an awning. She stumbles slightly, steadying herself against a cart, nearly upsetting a pile of fruit, and Wilson hurries to her. And then Wilson says, "Ma'am." So she's going to basically be walking through the market. She's going to stumble. Elizabeth behind Wilson is going to stumble, kind of lose her footing because she's, sick. And then Wilson's going to drop the shopping at the market and kind of help her out. So that's the page we're dealing with today. So I did thumbnail this already, where initially I think we're going to be behind Wilson. We're going to see the market in front of her. And then on the right, I know this is like chicken scratch to you guys, but I did kind of work this out roughly, where on the right side, let me get my painting here. So on the right side here, you're going to have basically Elizabeth's arm, and she's going to be holding a fan, but she's going to be cut off. She's in the foreground. Here, we're going to have the second part, which is going to be Wilson having that engagement, talking to the vendor. Here, we're going to have an awning that we're going to be seeing through the awning. We're going to see Elizabeth kind of stabling herself like against the awning. And we're going to see some apples right here. Let me see if I have actually, oh my goodness. Okay, I am showing you guys on stream. And then basically, Elizabeth's going to stumble, knock over the apples. Wilson's going to be running towards her. Here, we're going to see the vendor kind of mad because their apples got kind of knocked over. That's not in the script, but it just seems like a natural thing. And then here we're going to see Wilson steadying Elizabeth. I am crossing the line of action in that, but that's okay. That actually works because we're actually going to kind of show the difference of time. And then here we're going to see, again, like we're going to see Wilson and then Elizabeth. So yeah, that's pretty much the way to do it. Art by Galen said, "I think that's a good thing to do as well. Batching stuff together like that helps speed and consistency." For sure. And for me, because I'm working with a publisher, it helps to have the roughs like out for approval. And then by the time they've reviewed all 6, like I can start on the 6th. So like, point being, I'll probably knock out like 1 or 2 today. But by the end of the weekend, I hope to finish all 6. And then I can kind of send them for review. The second one's approved, I can start working on that one, even if they're, not able to review all 6. So it kind of keeps the workflow going too. All right, so that'll do it for this so far. I think we're going to basically knock this out and kind of make this work now. So we have, what do we have? Okay, so we have our notes. Now what I need to do is I'm going to come up with our rough page layout based on this thumbnail. and I'm going to steal a lot of that layout information from like the previous page. So let's see if we can find it. So when I'm doing these roughs, I find that it's like really helpful to have these panel borders that I can pull from previous panels. So the reason I was mentioning that at the top is like I feel like I know quite a few cartoonists who won't be transparent about the fact that they're kind of like, you know, supported like financially, and yet they'll kind of put pressure on other creators, like newer creators, as if like those creators have like a full day or whatever to dedicate to an entire page like every day of the week. And I just think it's important for like, I would like for more of those creators to be more open about kind of their scenario, where they have that time or that financial backing to kind of make that happen. And again, it's not a judgment. It's just more of like, it's kind of unfair for newer creators if that expectation is kind of placed on them to have just like immense amounts of free time to work on comics, because comic pages take like something like, you know, at their best, like I'm a pretty slow cartoonist, but usually a comic page is going to take you like 12 to 16 hours to do. Most cartoonists I know. And so I know some guys who like they'll, you know, what's weird is a lot of the guys I know that are in that scenario, like they don't have like that high of an output, and yet like they're in that scenario, which to me like is really strange, because I feel like if you are in that scenario, you should be like, I don't know, I feel like there's a certain responsibility. Again, that's my own take on it, but it's like I think it's an important thing for people to be transparent about, because again, like, you know, I don't know, I think there's like sort of an unrealistic idea sometimes that people have. Yeah, about the time it takes, and about just like what sort of scenarios people are in when it comes to like professional art. Because even at like the National Cartoonist Society, it's like, you know, a lot of the guys I know that are there, you know, they have like their day job at Disney or something like that, and then their side projects are these personal projects, and that's general for like even like huge like Disney directors and stuff like that, where it's like the time doesn't make itself, and unless you're in like a kind of strangely luxurious situation where you're able to focus on your own personal stuff and that's it, you're usually going to have to be doing this stuff like by squeezing in time. And so the point being, like, you're going to be writing burnout if you want to be a writer. That's my point. Like, if you're going to write it, the time's not going to make itself. And if you're not like super wealthy, or you're not in a scenario where you don't have to like breadwin or pay your bills, then like maybe that time won't ride burnout. But in the scenarios that like most human beings are in, um, you just have to kind of do it. You just have to kind of make the time. And it's you know, it's why like it's important. I think like yesterday it was important for me to actually take a day off, because again, I can't afford to like, I can't afford to burn out. I don't think my wife would want me to burn out. It's like I don't think anybody in my life wants me to burn out. Um, yeah, yeah, and May, my sister, actually was saying it does comics an injustice if you give them like, if you give people an unrealistic idea of like what it takes to make comics. The other thing is, it sometimes gives people like this idea that they can make bad comics, and that's another part of it, where people will be like, "Well, I mean, people make comics, so they must only take like 2 hours a page," and it's like, no, I mean, like, there's like mangaka artists out there that have like crazy output, but if you look into the reality of even their scenario, a lot of the times they're living in like dirt cheap apartments, like and like using like whatever they need to just like not sleep because they have to plug out like, 18 hours of work a day. It's a hard thing to do comics. So I think the idea of like preparing, expecting the possibility for potential burnout, and then also taking care of yourself while also realizing like if you want these things to get done, they're not going to just get done. Like my sister wrote a book recently, which you guys should all get. Oh my gosh, I don't have the copy right here. Hold on a second. I have it. I thought I had it over here. Here it is. Okay, so this is badass. October French and the Tour for the Broken Hearts, right? This is a full novel, right? Now, like how she wrote that, she made the time to write it. It's not like she magically was able to take like vacation time to write the book. Like she just wrote the book on top of her job. That's how books get written. And like, do you think that like, I'm just throwing out there, like hypothetically, like, is there a world where like, somebody working a second job doesn't like cause like some kind of like extra cost? No, I mean, like you're working a second job if you're writing. and so like if you're working two jobs, you got to watch out for your health, I'm just throwing that out there because I think it's important for hearing about that kind of thing. Art by Galen said, yeah, that bothers me too. I try to be super transparent. That's cool. Galen said, like, my wife is an ICU nurse and is easily the prime breadwinner of the family. I'm a stay-at-home and work-from-home dad, so I definitely have an advantage. Yeah, and I mean, like, in my relationship, it's like I think that there was definitely a period of time before Ben where I was like the work-at-home guy, and then my wife was working a day job, and it's like I think that's a pretty normal scenario. I do think I know people who are in that scenario where they have no kids and they're stay-at-home artists being kind of supported by their significant others. And like in those cases, like if you're not having high output on your art, like what the hell are you doing? I don't know why I feel like going on a rant about this. I think it's because I've just, well, no, I've also met I've met people that are kind of in our circle or in my circle that like they are in that scenario and yet they don't even put out like a page a day or a page a week. And it's just shocking to me because it's like, what are you doing? Like, what are you doing? If you have all day, you have no kid and you're in a stay-at-home situation and you don't have to earn income and you can just focus on your art, like, why do you not have like a graphic novel out like every 4 months? Like, yeah, so May, my sister was just talking about like if she was in that kind of scenario where she didn't have to like earn a living or something, she would have been able to knock out like that novel like in half, if not like less than half of that time.
Because their spouse probably isn't an artist and doesn't know
that
it doesn't take that long.
I know. But like anyhow, so
taking advantage.
My wife is an illustrator too, and it's like she like again doesn't have the luxury of having time to like work on her own stuff quite often because she is helping like with the bills, so she's taking paid work, that's just, yeah. Anyhow, but I'm just throwing that out there as like a I don't know. It's a rant that I wanted to mention because I'm like, if you're in that scenario, not you, Galen, in particular, I'm just saying, because honestly, like, I think you're a very productive artist, and it sounds like you really respect and admire your wife for kind of helping out with that. But it's like, my point is, if you're in that scenario, you better be doing work. If you're not doing work, then go get a job. Like, I don't know. I just think about it with my own son. Like if my son were to like hook up with somebody, like live under their roof and then like not work on art, if that's what was the deal, and didn't have output, I don't know. It would drive me nuts. I don't know why that's on my brain right now. It's just a pet peeve of mine, honestly. I don't know if I've been transparent about this. Okay, so we do have like some layout going on here. That's pretty cool. I don't know if I've been transparent about this, but like I will admit to being a bit of a classist. Like I get mad at rich people quite often. It's something I've worked really hard in my life because I've met people who grew up rich and are rich people or come from wealth, and they're really incredible people, and it's not like that makes them like a bad person. In fact, it just means that they probably had family that made like really wise financial decisions. I know this as like a full grown adult, right? But there is a part of me that like, it's like the kind of more punk rock part of me that like when I meet somebody who grew up really wealthy or like with a ton, I just instantly like kind of have disdain, and it's something I have to fight quite a lot. But it comes out pretty heavily when I meet some like artist who's in a rich kid scenario where they like got all the toys or whatever and they're not able to like produce work. Like to me, again, like I wouldn't judge them if they were producing work, but if you're not producing work and you're in that window of a situation, maybe you're listening to this, like stop making excuses, make comics, man. Okay, so let's get into this. But that's a very judgy thing for me to say. I don't know why that got me all riled up today. Oh, I love it. Art by Galen summarized it really well, where he said, "Yeah, don't waste your life," is what you're saying. Exactly, exactly. And also, if you're competing, like my point being, if you're trying to do freelance illustration and you're making a full living at it, I think this is where this stems from. When I was freelancing, I remember having to take like work that just sucked, like client work, because freelance is like feast and famine, right? And so I would take like, paying gigs. Like I'd take like these jobs where like I had to do like airplane diagrams or something like that for like a little bit. And I remember having friends who were in illustration who would only take like really sexy jobs. And I remember like for the longest time just thinking like, what is wrong with me that I have to take all this work that's like miserable work and these people are getting all the sexy work. Now, part of it was like I was early in illustration, and then as I went further in, I did get more attractive jobs. But part of it also, when I talked to those people, was that they were in a scenario where they didn't have to take that extra work because they weren't in a scenario where they had to provide money to anyone and even themselves. And so of course they can like, of course, like if I don't have to generate income as a freelance illustrator, then of course I can say no to like the job that like isn't as sexy or fun, and I can just take the good work. I could do like one cool illustration a year.
I think you just recently said no for the first time.
Yeah, this is the first time in my life where I've been in scenarios where I can say no. Yeah. It's literally because I've been busy, but it's like it's one of those things of like don't let other people pressure you on like how you're making a living doing art. If you're able to make a living doing art, congratulations, you're beating half of the people out there doing freelance. Like a lot of people out there doing freelance illustration, if like are in scenarios where like they're supported. And that's my point. If you're like coming from a standpoint of like someone who grew up poor, doesn't have a ton of income, stuff like that, and you're able to make a living drawing, good on you. And like, and also sometimes those people who are being really judgmental about like the work that you're taking on or something like that, because I used to get that, are literally coming from a complete place of entitlement where like they're in a scenario where like if the floor drops out, there's no like stakes of spikes underneath it. Whereas like most people, that are like lower middle class or poorer and don't have come from like wealth, like we're all in a scenario where, hey, if we're building our careers on art and that art thing collapses, like there's some like dangerous spikes under that floor, like anyhow, just throwing that out there. I don't know why I've been on this rant today. I think that just touched on like I remember getting really judged by an illustrator who, again, like I said, was like taking only the sexy work. And I think I at the time taking on some stuff, and it was a fun job. It's like I took on a thing for Weldon Owen that actually paid for like my wife and I to move to Oregon. And I remember when I was taking that on, it's like kind of boring illustrations. The books were really cool, but they were like airplane diagram type illustrations. And I remember at that time, one friend giving me a hard time about it. And then right after that, I found out that they were completely not bringing any income to their relationship and that they were supported and propped up by like their significant other. And I was like, well, why would you look at like, I'm literally like the primary, like I'm bringing like most of the income to my relationship with art. Like, and how dare that person judge me? I don't know if that makes sense, but it's like if somebody was like, being supported financially by someone and they're like, why are you working at McDonald's to like somebody who's poor and like that's their income? Like, it's like, you know what I mean? Like, don't judge like if you're not in that scenario. Anyhow, whew. That was my rant. We're actually supposed to be working on comics. I don't know why I got all mad about that. Galen, in the chats, thank you for hanging in there. He said another huge mistake I used to make was lessening my quality to justify a lower payment just to get a gig. Yeah, I made that mistake probably in the early part of my career for sure, where that's a hard learned lesson, but it's like one of those things of like, no, you do high quality, you do the best work you can do on every job you have, and eventually the good work comes. It's same with books. It's like, the first few of these, I couldn't get a publisher to look at my book sideways, but I kept just making the best comics I could make. And now I'm actually in a scenario where I have publishers, which is really cool. That was a longer path for me than for some people I know, but it's something to kind of think about. So anyhow, I think that's part of why I feel guilt. That's why I was rambling. I might be part of why I feel guilt if I have a night where I have to sleep or something instead of work. Because first off, I'm a workaholic. Second off, I do know that like the windows of time to make these things is never going to generate itself. And also I have sometimes been getting pressure from people who aren't in similar situations where they have to actually make an income. It's anyhow. So there we go. Let's get into comics and something productive and positive. Okay, so right here, we're gonna start thumbnailing, and I'm not gonna do an angry rant anymore. It just took a long time for me to learn that I didn't owe it to people to make my work affordable for them. Yeah, charging accordingly. I've used this example before, but I quote a fair rate, for what I do. But it's fair for me and the client. And in general, like what I've seen is when you're a seasoned illustrator who charges like reasonable industry standard rates, that to a lot of like people don't sound reasonable or industry standard, those people will get a lot more work that are underbidding. But what's funny is like it'll be in a scenario where I'll do 2 illustrations and they'll do 10 illustrations, and I've made the same amount of money that they made from 10 for doing 2. And then also those 2, because I'm getting paid adequately when I do take freelance, I'm able to invest time and make the best 2 that I can. And so my stuff's always going to look cooler in those scenarios than like the person who's just scrambling and going, I got to do 500 of these. Like, now keep in mind with comics, it's a totally different game. In this case, like with this comic, there's an advance and it was a good advance, but it's like, but in general, this is a creator owned endeavor. And so for us, like for both myself and the author, while the advance is nice, we're putting in our best effort and quality for the residuals. Like if this thing takes off, we're going to get a cut of the royalties. And if it's a book that becomes evergreen, then you're in a scenario where you're getting a lot of great passive income. And that's kind of the game I'm playing with comics. Because I'm not super interested in comics as work for hire. Comics as work for hire, I think, is a I mean, God bless people who do it, but that's a hard gig to make a living doing. And I'm probably not fast nor good enough, nor like do I have a scenario where I can just afford to do that, you know? Okay, here we go. And I hope like my rant didn't sound like a judgment of people who are in that kind of scenario. It makes sense. I mean, the creator of Calvin and Hobbes talked about being in that scenario. And I think there's another side of it that he talked about in his comic, right? Where it's like, you know, there's a very famous comic by him where he talks about like sort of being judged for being in that scenario by people, you know, who don't understand art, you know. So don't get me wrong. Like if you're in that kind of scenario where you're like being supported while you're making art, there's nothing wrong with that. In fact, it makes perfect sense. It's just if you're in that scenario, be like the creator of Calvin and Hobbes and make a body of work, right? Like even if it's not going to succeed, like, I don't know, if I were a person, I don't know. I'm just saying if I were in that scenario, I would expect a body of work. You know what I mean? I don't know. But also I might just have like too high of standards for myself and stuff. I don't know. Art by Galen said, work for hire is garbage. I hate that so much. It depends. You know, like I spent 20 years doing a ton of work for hire and making a really good living doing it. And then I got to a point where I didn't really care about work other than comics. And so I was like, if I'm going to have to do, you know, client work of any kind, I'd rather just be in a scenario where I'm working in-house, where a sales department is bringing the clients, where I have a prearranged schedule, and that will allow me time to actually do my comics. Because like anything outside of that, also, yeah, like health benefits and all of that kind of stuff. Because I had health benefits, but it is more, well, then again, this was all pre-Obamacare. So like, which everybody talks about like that was some kind of negative, which is insane too, to think about. Because that is one of the most positive things that's ever happened to our country for freelance artists. If you tried to price, like back when I was a sole proprietor, pricing for insurance was insane. Like it was insane because you can't collectively bid for insurance, and so your insurance rates are like skyrocketed higher. I think now it's gotten better because you have more options as a freelancer, and so I think like probably the insurance scenario might be a little better now. And I will say there's also the adverse of that, where people will always look at freelancers and just be like, well, I mean, how do you do it? How do you get insurance? And you're like, how do you get insurance at your work? You just pay for it. That's it. You know, it's like, it's not like it's impossible to be insured when you're self-employed. It's not like it's impossible to have benefits of any kind. Like you could make your own vacation time when you're self-employed. I mean, all that means is just budgeting and saving, you know? But you can pay yourself for vacation time. The pay comes from somewhere. It's either from an employer, or if you're self-employed, you are the employer. And if you don't have the budget for it, guess what? You just don't get to offer yourself as many benefits, right? Because you're a smaller business. So, but point being, I did opt for the scenario where I have consistency and benefits, and then I can focus on these more kind of artsy comics that I think are kind of more my cup of tea. Okay, so we're gonna do. I gotta get to working, man. My brain is just. I am having a distracted morning. All right, so let's get into this. So I have my rough layout. Now I'm gonna start thumbnailing. I think I'm going to just look at some of this street vendor stuff, but I kind of want to do the background after I do. Okay. Let's move this thumbnail over a little bit. Man, it's funny. It's like I was all exhausted and kind of out of it because of that yesterday. And now I'm like rested. So my brain is firing like 20 miles a minute. And apparently I'm in like a pissy, venti mood where I'm like, you know what else sucks? A bagel would be awesome. Thank you. My wife's rad. I'm just saying. And my wife's in a scenario like I said, like very similar to mine, where it's like we are both people who we have to work for a living, and like, you know, so that means sometimes you don't get to take the fun jobs. And if you take the fun jobs, you're gonna have to ride a little bit of potential burnout, which I'm not saying is a bad thing. I'm just saying, like, if you're in a scenario where you're having to do that, you're not alone, and that's okay. Like that's kind of the art thing. The worst thing you could do as a writer, like, I'm really proud of my sister-in-law for like writing that novel. The worst thing you can do as a writer is wait for the magic window. Like the magic window is like a deception, and it's dangerous. It's like that idea that like someday, like everything's going to align, and then I'm going to have time to make all my different visions come to life. It's just not going to happen. Like you know, if it does, cool. But like, you have to make these things, and it's a lot of work. I've never met somebody who writes a book and was just like, yeah, it got well, okay. I've read about one person like that, which is Jack Kerouac, right? Where he wrote On the Road on a single sheet of paper and just kind of knocked it out. And it's like an American classic. That's the dream. But I mean, I don't know. I tend to think Jack Kerouac probably did the work. I mean, he still did the work. He still hustled. He still went to like different poetry readings and stuff like that to like get people to be familiar. Let me make sure that, let's see. Oh, we do have some baskets here. Okay, cool. So I'm going to draw Wilson here. She's going to be in this outfit this time. Boom. That one down there. And we're just going to rough out her pose and posture and make sure that we're saving along the way. But anyhow, as corny as it is, it's just like, yeah, like don't let the bastards get you down is what I'm saying. And also realize it's a support network, you know. It's like a good example, like you know, like my wife is like really aware of my deadline right now, and she's like been super supportive and taken on more, like to allow me that window from like 9 to 2. You know, it's like it's a collaborative effort, like this whole thing, you know. But there's costs to it, right? Like, it's like, you know, I have friends who've like asked me to hang out that I've had to say no to, and you get more used to it, like as you go on. But it's like, yeah. But my point is just like, it's not like a, yeah. It's not like a magic, thing where like all of your responsibilities just disappear and like, and there's no costs to like making art. Like making art costs something. It really does. And again, like if I meet somebody, man, I would be furious personally if I like, okay, I will just put it this way. If I were in a relationship with somebody who like I was supporting 100%, and they had complete windows of time for like an entire year or two where they didn't have to do anything. They didn't have to bring any income. They didn't have any responsibilities outside of like just being at home. They have no kid. And I found out that they did like a drawing a month or something, and it was like it depends. If they're a painter and it's a painting that's going to take 10 years, but I would be furious. I would be, I don't know. And I know people who will put up with that, and I think that's insane. Like, don't use the art excuse just to be like the person who's like moping around at home. That's just, I don't know. That just seems like a really crappy thing to do. However, it's like, I don't know. I might be crazy on that. Yeah, Art by Galen said, I spent 7 months doing 160 illustrations, and yeah, I'll save you my own rant. Good. I love it. And then Art by Galen said, I'm very biased. I got totally screwed in my first large illustration gig. I didn't understand that work for hire means you can own literally nothing of the art. Yeah, that's something worth understanding. And you can, work for hire is just part of the gig, is you don't own what you make, which kind of sucks. But if you're doing comics, I don't know. I feel like comics, you shouldn't be doing work for hire. Like you need a piece of that creation, especially if you're doing the art, I'm sorry to hear that, Galen. That sucks. I spent, and then she said, yes, let me fuel your rage. I'll get you a bagel. My wife is so sweet. If my friends want to hang out, I tell them I'll get on Discord, Twitch, or YouTube. Yeah, 100%, said Art by Galen. Cool. And I know everybody's in different scenarios or whatever, but I don't know why I got so extra peeved. Oh, my wife brought me the bagel, and now I need to eat it. Should I eat on stream? I guess I could. We're at like an hour in. I'm going to do Elizabeth's arm real quick. This is the outfit I want Elizabeth in right here. So we're going to kind of rough that in. Again, this is just a rough. It's a tight rough, but it's a rough. So what I'm doing here is just kind of working out the kind of scenario. The scenario. So Elizabeth's going to be, her arm is going to be kind of down. She's got these like sort of puffy sleeves. And she's going to be holding a fan. And that's something I need to actually look up real quick. So let's Google that. And then Art by Galen said, go ahead and eat on stream. I won't tell anyone. Awesome. Thank you. How are you doing, Art by Galen? What are you working on? John Coyote said, good morning with a happy face. How's it going, John Coyote? How is your zine coming along? It sounds like you were working on a really cool one. Sorry, John, I haven't asked you, what are your preferred pronouns? Because I don't want to get them wrong. Let me know in the chats. But anyhow, for now, I'll use they because I think that's a safer bet. So John is working on a really amazing zine that is talking about the phases of the moon. and it sounds incredible. It sounds amazing, and I'm kind of excited about it. Okay, cool. John said my zine is completed now, and he, him. What are yours? He, him, or mine? I just realized like I almost misgendered, and I don't want to do that. So I'm glad. Thank you for clarifying that. Art by Galen said, well, TBH, I'm working on some spicy pinup art today. My main two areas of work these days are comics and spicy arts. Spicy is fun. Spicy pinups sound amazing. Yeah, I'm excited about. So, what kind of spicy pinup? Spicy pinups can be cool. My favorite, like some of my favorite. I really like the old sort of 1950s, 1940s pinup art from like World War II. There's something amazing about just the quality of that and the poses. I don't know. It's pretty amazing. I'm no expert on pinup art, but I think there is like a thing to be said for that as like an art form. And we have, okay, so now we've got Elizabeth in the foreground. She's going to be kind of leaning a little bit. And this hair doesn't look right for Wilson. I just realized like Wilson has her hair, I guess she could have her hair up, but I think she's going to need that kind of recognizable hair. This is one of the things about comics that's unfortunate is like you kind of, when you're making characters, like I remember somebody explaining why like Charlie Brown was such an effective character. And it was the fact that like he's so recognizable. Like it just works really well sequentially when you have something like a t-shirt with a zigzag line or like his little curly bop hair. And it's like if Charlie Brown's hairstyle changed every minute in those comics, it would be really hard to sequentially follow or connect with the character. Not that your characters always have to have a costume, but you know, I think Noah Van Sciver, the better of the Sciver brothers, the one that's not a douchebag, Noah Van Sciver talks about that too with like Fanta Bukowski, which is a great comic. It's hilarious. But he chose to kind of like, with a lot of his work, he's kind of trying to do the Charles Schultz thing, but instead he just uses a ridiculous mustache on his main character because he figures like, hey, if that stays consistent, there's interviews and stuff where he talks about it. And I think it's really good thinking. So similarly, I don't want to change Wilson's hair because then we're not going to recognize Wilson. If I do, I'd want to make it kind of a bigger deal. And then what is this? Art by Galen said, I do a lot of styles. I have more painted style. I've got my comic style. And lately I'm merging them together along with a more anime-ish facial structure. I actually had my first spicy art book come out recently, thanks to Kickstarter. Nice. John, how are people supposed to get your comic? Out of curiosity, I'm curious. Like, are you selling it on a site or anything like that? That would be cool to kind of know about. And while you let us know about it, I think we're gonna take a break. Again, like I'm gonna live stream till about 11, and but since we're at the hour mark, I'm gonna take a break, refill my coffee, and start eating this bagel. And at 11 o'clock, we're gonna all hopefully head over to Gary Hodges' channel to watch some awesomeness on there. But for now, I'm gonna put on the trailer for Jacob's Apartment, and then we'll get moving even further on these roughs. So, okay, here is Jacob's Apartment. Oh. Well, I probably should find it. Okay, here is the trailer for Jacob's Apartment. I'll be back. Speak clearly, it seems that only
And you get, plus it's also bad for people like clients that don't.
Sorry, I'll be right back. Well, I'm still on, but yeah. Oh, cool. Awesome. Yay. We were just looking at anyhow, it's funny. My little rant got everybody all riled up here. Everybody's like, yeah. Like, anyhow, so let's see here. John clarified how you can get a hold of the zine. John Coyote said, I'll be selling it via Etsy. I'll probably have it listed next week. If I had one of my mods in chat, I'd have them put a link to that. But I'll tell you what, John, when you're done with that, like message me on Facebook or something. I'm just on Facebook at Joshua Kemble, Kemble, and send me a link so I can mention it on the stream. And also, I'd love to check it out. Maybe pick up a copy. If you guys have a thing about eating on stream, sorry. I'm gonna eat on stream, which I feel like I've done this. I'm always hesitant to do it, and I feel like for streamers, like that's just part of streaming. Awesome. Art by Galen said, I'm Art by Galen on all things. Please drop me a DM with a link as well, if you don't mind. Yeah, I love it. Yeah, because I think most of us like zines, you know? I know a couple people used to pronounce it zines, and I have no idea how that happened. Like, I'm not judging it. I mean, I've mispronounced things before too. But it was so weird to me because I think for people who got into like punk rock, and like for me in junior high, like that's kind of how you would order a lot of music was through zines. Like record labels would even have their own little like order catalog zine kind of things. So I could imagine if somebody wasn't as familiar with the culture, you know, but to me it's zines. I mean, if anybody calls it zines, I'm like, nope, zines. It's a mini magazine. Now, if it were a Frankenstein zine, then I could understand calling it a zine, you know? Like, it's a Frankenstein zine. I'm here all day, guys. All right, we're all fired up. Let's make some art. Oh man, I do want to say this. Like, I think that Adam Lord did a stream recently about comics, and I'm really curious to see it because I think he was kind of expounding upon something I was talking about on on chat. So Adam, I will be watching that stream a little bit from now. I'm kind of excited to get like a little topic back and forth with you. I watched like maybe 10 minutes of it before I had to start working. But I want to watch the rest. I'll probably watch it after Gary's stream because I want to catch Gary's live. But I'll try to watch and respond if it brings anything up. I have a feeling we're probably more in agreement than disagreement on it. Because I think his point is, I went on a rant on a stream a little bit ago where I was talking about the importance of like try to make something good and new. Like, you know, we can make better stuff. We don't have to make stuff that's all derivative. But I think his point was also like going back to the old isn't always bad either. And actually, it's funny. I think both can be true. Like, I think in order to make new, we have to go back to the old. Like, to me, one of the most important things for my growth as a cartoonist was like, and this is just me responding the first like 10 minutes that I listened to it. I want to listen to the full stream. But for me, as a cartoonist, like when I very late in the game discovered Winsor McKay. And I remember it because my wife and I went to this show called The Masters of American Comics, and that kind of introduced us to Winsor McKay. And it was like, for those of you who, the first time you find out about Winsor McKay, and then you look at the date, at least as an artist or a cartoonist, and it's like 1906. Yeah, or sorry, it's probably like more like 1906, 1910. And you look at this art and you're like, how is this 1910? It looks better than like most published anything at the time. It was like some of the most beautiful illustration work ever done. And you also see just like the playing with the medium and the lack of restrictions with like panels and the creativity, and just, of course, like the incredible, okay, this is a market, so I shouldn't just be drawing the houses. The just insanely incredible amount of perspective knowledge and detail and like creativity in those pages. And then you discover like Frank King and like Gasoline Alley and stuff like that. It's like there's stuff cartoonists were doing at the very beginning of this whole medium that like we can actually do again. Like we can learn a lot from it. So my point is, I leveled up a lot by looking into the past of cartooning. And that's something I consistently do. Even the style of this comic that I'm doing here is like slightly influenced by older illustrations and stuff like that. So when I was talking about making new stuff, I wasn't talking about having to reinvent the wheel. I kind of agree with I forget who said it, but I kind of agree with the sentiment that like, to an extent, there really are no new stories. Pretty much all stories can be boiled down to like a Shakespearean plot line. Like Shakespeare kind of hit all the different plots, and all we're doing from this point on is just kind of rehashing those different stories, right, in our own way. What I meant by like trying to not make things that are derivative was like more of just like a weird thing that I see in comics where it feels like people quite often are just doing like I'm going to make Spider-Man, but this time it's just a different costume. To me, I think we can do better than that. That's all I'm saying. It's not that that's all. I mean, that's wrong. Like, that's fine. You can make Spider-Man with like, instead of shooting webs, maybe he shoots beams of energy. Maybe the character is like that, but the storyline itself outside of the character work is unique or interesting or doing something, pushing the medium. But I do feel like I think we can do better in those scenarios. So that's kind of more what my rant was about. But when it comes to like looking to the past, I think that's a really good thing. And I think making the best quality of work you can make is the ideal. So even if you're going to rehash Spider-Man and remix it, make the best rehash Spider-Man you can, you know? I just find it boring personally when like people are rehashing stuff in like a very like predictable way and like aren't really interested in like furthering the medium and are just kind of doing the same old, but then are masking it as if they're like indie revolutionaries. That's the part that bugs me, you know, with that. That's kind of more what I was getting at. Where it's like you'll have, like, imagine like a band that's, you know, calling themselves like a super indie rock band and like they're pretty much just doing Creed or something like super corporate and being like, yeah, we're the indie guys. It's like, I don't know if that's I wouldn't call that like indie, you know, but maybe that's me. Again, this is just my rant angry stream, but I want to watch the rest of what Adam has to say because I kind of think I'll probably agree with him on quite a lot of it. Oh, we got it. Okay, we got some interesting comments here. Art by Galen said, to me, the most important thing is just to make things that I enjoy making and that I would enjoy as a consumer. I like that. That's a good point. Best quote I've heard, early 2000s art magazine. Everything's been done, but not by you. Agreed. John Coyote said, you see similar stories in folklore across the world. Folklore is awesome. I agree. Oh, I like that. I initially found out about the different full moons from a farmer's almanac. That's awesome. And then Art by Galen said, also, I think sticking to existing IPs for new creation is a sign of insecurity, the ability to create quality new IPs. Yeah, and I think like the thing that's weird to me is like when people are claiming they're revolting against the mainstream. This was what my original rant was. It's like people who are mad that like these companies are making the same IPs and then they just basically make Batman again with a different costume. And they're like, we're the revolution. We're challenging these companies that all they do is publish Batman. It's like, you're not really challenging that hegemony of like Batman or whatever. You're just solidifying why they should keep publishing Batman, you know? But I think like remixing in a way where it's like kind of like Stranger Things where it's very derivative, but it's doing something new with derivative work, I think is good. I don't think you have to try to be unique. I think actually one of the key things is just don't try to be a mimic. Like play the music you want to play. But if you're a band and you set out to sound like like you're just like, I just want to be Nirvana. That's it. We're just going to make songs that sound exactly like Nirvana. I wouldn't be surprised if your stuff just ends up sounding like a really cheap, bad copy of Nirvana, right? And that's okay for like a starting out band. We all start and have our influences and stuff. And hell, I mean, my influences you can probably see all over my work, you know, especially my illustration work. But it's like setting out to tell your own story. And maybe you're like, instead, like, okay, let's use that band example of like Nirvana. You're like, I like the way they use simple chord structures and kind of like do a slower, more kind of rhythm based punk, and mix it a little bit with like rock and roll or something. Like, I don't know, you pull something you like about it and you say, I'm going to be inspired by this. I think that is pretty good, you know. That's a pretty good way to go. I need some vendors in this scene too. But I think we all know, like, you know, there's times where you like we'll see like that knockoff product, you know, where I don't know, it's like a good example, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. When that was a hit in the 80s, like everyone had some kind of mutant animal comic that was like a derivative. I mean, just like a bare bones derivative. And they weren't doing parody or satire. They were just like trying to get in on the Ninja Turtles money, you know? That's the kind of thing that I'm like, come on, guys, we can do better than that, you know? Like if you're going to start a shoe company and you're coming up with a logo, don't just do like the swoosh upside down, you know, and be like, we're like Nike, but not, you know, like that's, you're not really challenging big shoes if you're like making knockoff Nikes and calling your shoe a different shoe. And that's what I've seen a lot in like pseudo indie comics, not actual indie comics, but like there's like a weird comic movement where people are doing just like cheap knockoffs and then calling themselves revolutionaries. And like that to me is like, that's the part where I'm like, I get kind of, I mean, everybody should do their own thing, but I hope that kind of makes sense. Hopefully that kind of explains it. Obviously, Adam, I'll get more into that later on or whatever, but I think I'll probably end up agreeing with your point on your video. I'm curious. I want to check it out. I agree with Landon here. Nirvana's chord structures weren't all that simple because a chord is the combination of everything that's going on in music: guitars plus leads, plus bass, blues, and vocals. Yeah, and I mean their structure was good. I was just saying, as a guitarist, like a lot of they were one of the bands that like brought to rock and roll like the power chord, you know. Like a lot of hardcore punk bands were doing, you know, power chords, but they were doing like really fast tempo stuff, which Nirvana did a bit of. But they sort of brought that aesthetic with like more melody and a little more complexity and much more nuanced like rhythms and stuff. Like the drums were like a lot more complicated. But I'd agree with you, Landon. I was just saying, for a guitarist to play it, it's not as hard to play. But there's definitely complexity in the music. I actually really love Nirvana. But I also remember in the 90s, there were like 20 bands that were like really obviously just like a parody of Nirvana. Like, and, you know, quite often they were like corporation pushed, where it'd be like, this is the Nirvana for, you know, this is Nirvana, but they're promoting Arco or something. I don't know. And I think it would be weird if it's like a knockoff fake Nirvana type band that came out at the peak when Nirvana was really popular. And then suddenly they're saying, we're revolutionizing music. Like, no, you're just ripping off Nirvana, you know? I just find it weird. I don't know. I just noticed, not in indie comics, but like kind of in some of the movements, online movements in comics, where people will be claiming they're like doing this revolutionary thing, and and it's not. Whereas I'll look at something like Watchmen or something, and that was revolutionary. You know, that was doing something new with something old. It was still derivative, you know. Or really, like, if you want to see like revolutionary indie treatment of superheroes, look up Death Ray, Daniel Klaus. Or honestly, you could look at now I'm blanking out, but oh my gosh, the guys from Hip Hop Family Tree guy. The guy who did Hip Hop Family Tree is doing like remixes of Marvel comics. And I feel like that's something incredible and new. The approach. But I don't think there's anything wrong with derivative work. I just think it's weird when you see these people claiming that they're doing something like really revolutionary by and basically like making exactly the product that they're complaining about. That's the part that I find odd. I think the Nike example would come into play. But at the end of the day, we're all just making art, and hopefully we're all making good art. I think that's the key, is just try to make good stuff. You can also make things that are like a love letter to the things you love and just be open about the things you love. And that's great too, you know? Like, like Sherlock Holmes or something, you know? If you wanted to do a Sherlock Holmes and it's like, let's say you did a character that's pretty much supposed to be like Sherlock Holmes, but you wanted it to be like kind of Sherlock Holmes with a twist. I think that would be great. But if you're doing nothing relatively new with that character and then you're publicly walking around just trash talking Sherlock Holmes, that's where it becomes kind of weird, where it's like, really? Is it? I mean, you know what I mean? I don't know if that makes sense. That's the part I'm saying, you know. There's a slew of like indie comics that are trying to say they're like fighting the mainstream, and then they're kind of just making the mainstream. Like, it's not that's the part that baffles me, where it's like, man, we got to fight the mainstream, and then you look and you're like, oh, it's just mainstream, you know. That's my only kind of like weird indie snob point that I think Adam was talking about. But again, like I need to watch his video because I can't fully address it till I see the whole thing. Art by Galen said, I agree 100% with the love letter thing. And then they said, like, I love Ghost in the Shell. I included a dream sequence in issue 3 of my book that resembled a scene from it. I didn't try to recreate it, just show my love for it. Yeah. And again, like, that's cool. But like, here's where, to me, it would be weird. Okay, so let's say that exact same thing, Galen, but instead, like, hypothetically, if you were walking around saying Ghost in the Shell is totally corporate bullshit, and like you went on these rants and tirades against Ghost in the Shell, and you were like even saying that the creators of Ghost in the Shell were just terrible people. I'm not saying they are, I'm just saying this is the hypothetical. And then you had a tribute or like something that was pretty much just Ghost in the Shell in your comic. That's the only part I'd take issue with. And that's the thing I was ranting about, was just like a lot of comic creators that are like going on these tangents against like mainstream comics. And then they're pretty much just making the same thing as the mainstream comic, but at the same time pretending that they hate and they're standing against mainstream comics. That's the part that like was my purpose of my rant. Yeah, and Art by Galen said, yeah, that'd just be stupid. Yeah, exactly, because Ghost in the Shell is amazing. John Coyote said Ghost in the Shell is amazing. Ghost in the Shell is amazing. But it'd be weird if you were making a comic that was derivative of it. Like the Nirvana example. It'd be weird if you were like making music that was just like a pseudo Nirvana, and then you're running around saying like Nirvana sucked or something. Because like, again, like if you're influenced by it, like unless you're satiring it, like I could understand if you're doing satire and you're kind of through your art showing what's kind of stupid about it, then great, you know, but like, but yeah, that's what I had gone on a rant about when it came to like making new things. Was like, my only point was like, if you're going to be like the indie counterculture kind of thing, and that's your whole purpose of marketing, is that like, hey, we're this new, like we're fighting the system with this new thing, and then you're just making exactly what you're complaining about. That's where I was like going on a long tangent that I think Adam was kind of commenting on. But my point was like that, you know, it's just weird to me if you're like mad at like the derivative writing in comics and then you write derivatively written comics. Like that's doesn't make a lot of sense. That's all. Yeah. Yeah, John Coyote said that would be really weird. Yeah, that's what I was reacting to, because I just noticed that with a couple online things, but nothing in our community, which is cool. All right. So I've gone on angry rants about stay-at-home illustrators who aren't open about being stay-at-home illustrators. Or illustrators who have like supportive spouses that aren't like acknowledging their supportive spouses, whether financially or not. Or illustrators judging other illustrators' output when like they're in different scenarios than we are, right? Like that kind of thing. So that's one of the things I was going on an angry rant about. And then apparently the other rant was just kind of continuing one from before. So I'm just an angry guy today. I'm usually pretty positive on these streams, so forgive me for my like sauciness. I got influenced by I don't know. I have no idea. But we're finishing some thumbnails, so that's good. So I like this rough. I have just finished my snack for the morning, and I apologize if that gave like some really weird audio. And now John Coyote said, no, you got strong thoughts about things important to you. That's right. Darn right. And I think the context of my original rant about the cartoonist thing was that like, I really value indie comics, and a lot of indie comics I really like that I've followed for years have been doing stuff that's challenging to the mainstream. And so to see like kind of a slew of like new indie creators that are sort of criticizing comics and pretending that like almost ignoring the whole independent movement that's been going on for like 30 something years, it's like equivalent to like somebody who got all mad about mainstream music and was like, we're making this new thing that goes against the mainstream. And it's like just ignored, like, let's say they're doing hip hop and they were just ignoring the just groundbreaking, incredible work that's been going on in the underground in hip hop for like decades, you know, for like that's true for comics, where there's been so much challenging and interesting and crazy authentic work that's come out of the underground. And then there's this new slew of like of superhero cartoonists, most of who work for the mainstream, are very out of touch with the underground. And they're kind of coming into the indie scene and being like, we're going to change the whole mainstream. And it's like, oh my gosh, you guys, welcome to the club. But you guys are, and then not only that, by saying we're going to change the mainstream, they're literally just making the mainstream comics with different costumes. That's where it gets kind of annoying, because it's like, that's not really like, you know, you're not really challenging the mainstream. That's all I'm saying. Anyhow, okay, I'm gonna disappear for a second, and then I think we can probably knock out one more panel of roughs before Gary Hodges' stream. Art by Galen said, I don't know about changing anything. I just want to tell a fun story. I do too. I'm just saying it. I only judge people by like what, like I judge them by their own judgment of what they're expecting or what their goal is. And so it, like for me, if a band is just playing music, I'm like, cool, play whatever music you want. If a band's playing good music, cool, play whatever music you want. If a band is playing like covers of Led Zeppelin, which by the way, Led Zeppelin, almost all their music was derivative, right? But let's say like hypothetically, the band is playing Led Zeppelin covers and are like, we love Led Zeppelin. Good, more power to them. If they're playing music that sounds a crap load like Led Zeppelin and they're saying we love Led Zeppelin, cool. If they're playing Led Zeppelin, but then every single interview they're doing and the way they're marketing their stuff is by saying Led Zeppelin was the worst band ever, we're making music that's just going to destroy that kind of music, and then they play songs that are exactly Led Zeppelin songs, that's where I take issue. I hope that kind of makes sense. That's the part that I got a little mad about, is I feel like there were a lot of Led Zeppelin cover bands that were playing exactly that. Anyhow, so okay, I'm gonna put the trailer for Two Stories on. Right now we've got Elizabeth Barrett Browning in the far right, the foreground, on the right, holding a fan. We have Wilson, she's holding her basket, and they're going to be walking into this marketplace. And then we are going to get back to this and try to do another one pretty soon. I like Landon's observation, though, about Nirvana's chord structures. I agree. I really love Nirvana. My favorite album's In Utero. It's the best Nirvana album. And with that being said, I'm going to put on the trailer for Two Stories. We are back. I don't know why I'm wearing headphones. Nobody's on stream. That's only if I'm in conversation with people. So I will say we're going to draw for about 20 more minutes, and then we're going to probably I'll be working and watching Gary Hodges stream. I probably won't join his stream just because of the fact that like this kind of thing, I do have to kind of stay focused. As you can see, I even lost a little bit of focus just going on these tangents. But anyhow, so we're probably going to go for about 20 more minutes, and then we're going to hop over and watch Gary Hodges' Dinosaurs versus Mars Bots at 11. Okay. So I'm thinking for the public market, we have like all sorts of references, which is great. And I also want to be clear, I'm not against derivative work. I'm just against like crapping on the thing you're deriving from, you know, like that's the part that that's weird to me is like, if you're going to make the derivative work, go for it. You know, like actually one of the most revolutionary things you can do is going backwards. I think that, you know, like whenever I've met young cartoonists who haven't like, you know, like me, like we're like young cartoonists who didn't know about like Winsor McCay when I was younger. And then like I got turned on to Winsor McCay. That affected my modern work by looking backwards to like the beginning of comics. You can actually learn a lot and kind of advance a lot and actually make really cool new things. Like sometimes going to what is old can be some of the most amazing ways to, you know, get to what is new. Yeah. But I remember, let me see if I can kind of explain what I'm thinking here. So there's this guy that I had to read a lot in graduate school. He's like an art theorist. This might get boring. If this gets boring, let me know in the chat so I can change subject. But he was like an art theorist, and his name was Baudrillard, and he wrote about the procession of the simulacra. And what's weird is he, within his own writing, like I'm not a huge Baudrillard fan, and part of it was he criticized a lot of the philosophy that his philosophy was built on. And so that's one of the big problems I have. And not criticize like, hey, you know, these were some good like legs that were built and we're kind of building a table on this on these legs. Not that kind of criticism, or saying like, hey, like these people were right in this way, but they erred in this side and we can correct for it. But just more like outright just casting aside old philosophers. But then the weird thing is, if you break down his philosophy that he's presenting, it literally was just the idea of like Plato's cave or whatever. And it's like that to me was one of the most annoying things to read all these people saying this philosopher is just bringing so much newness to this industry and stuff like that. And people who would kind of like disregard Plato and then at the same time be like all about Baudrillard, not realizing that Baudrillard was basically just saying you know, he wanted to do Plato's cave, but just, you know, add the word like digital to it. That's one of my pet peeves. And I think the reason it's a pet peeve is it's hypocrisy. It's just hypocritical. That's the part that bugs me. And again, like, you know, for people outside of the comics industry, and honestly, not really the comics industry, just people outside of the online comics sphere, you know, there's like this whole group of artists led by one guy who like worked for like the mainstream and is a really talented artist, but honestly is just kind of a douchebag to people online. And he is leading this whole movement of people who are like completely criticizing everything that's going on in the mainstream. But then most of the work that these people have been kickstarting and producing is like exactly the same exact thing that the mainstream is doing. So it's like kind of like if you were making Oh, a good example, like Battlestar Galactica, the original, was very derivative of Star Wars, but the creator of that wasn't just running around just saying that Star Wars was like the stupidest movie ever made, and he's making this new revolutionary movie. That's where the only thing I take issue with is that, like, if the creator of Battlestar Galactica was running around saying like, dude, Star Wars is just the worst thing ever, and then making Battlestar Galactica, you'd be like, I mean, you know what I mean? Like, and I like Battlestar Galactica, but it's like to pretend that that's not at all derivative of like Star Wars or Star Trek is insanity. Like, and if the creator of it were to say, I'm making this new thing that's completely going to destroy Star Wars and Star Trek because they're the worst that's ever been, then like that's where I take issue with it, right? Because there's clear hypocrisy there. Like, you're building on a base. Yeah. Yeah, and Art by Galen said, "Oh, I know who we're talking about," and he said, "Yeah, I'm not a fan of that crap attitude they've got." Yeah, I'm not either. I'm not either. I don't understand it. It's like, why not just make good comics? Just make good comics. We can do better. And if you want to make new derivative stuff, like if you want to make stuff that's challenging, then look to the indie scene. Like, that's been going for like 40 years. Like, the indie scene has been making stuff that would blow your mind. Like, even mainstream guys in the indie scene. I mean, buy Asterius Polyp, like by David Maliki, and then look at is it David Maliki? Hang on, Asterius Polyp. I have the book. David Mazzucchelli, sorry. David Mazzucchelli, who is from the mainstream, right? I believe he worked on like Batman and Superman. But he made this book called Asterius Polyp, and it's like, it is sequentially doing things I have never seen done in comics. Like, it's one of the most challenging, interesting books you'll ever see. And it's like, that is really fascinating. If I put that next to all of that community I was just referring to's comics, it's like, and then I hear them saying that they're the revolution in comics, I'm like, what are you talking about? Like I just don't understand it. Okay. Okay, so we need, this is going to be her talking to a vendor. Okay. Okay. So I think I'm going to have like a vendor here. They have these like interesting hats. Like, I'm looking at that drawing down there. Again, these are roughs. Art by Galen said, it may be somewhat of a snob, but in general, if someone's promoting something that they made and they're telling me how great and revolutionary it is, I lose interest immediately. Yeah, and I guess like it's just weird when you come from the world of indie and punk rock, where it's like, you know, I'm trying to think of like a good example. Okay, so like, let's say I have nothing against the band Hanson, right? Like, I don't. I mean, they're just making pop music and stuff. But let's pretend for a second that Hanson was walking around saying they're challenging punk rock, like they are making the most punk rock thing on the planet. And that's how they're marketing it, which actually might be funny. I almost wish this were the case. But like, imagine that was happening when you're familiar with like Fugazi and Ian MacKaye and like Joy Division and like like bands that were literally pushing, like the Pixies, like these bands like that were changing music. And then and also even those bands wouldn't be marketing themselves as like, we're the revolution, like, I don't know. That's where I get a little like, really, guys, come on. So that's the part that I take issue with. I'm almost 40 and was a skater punk kid as a teen. I still rock some Vandals and NoFX and stuff like that from time to time. Yeah, and like, so NoFX would be a good example of like a band that I don't think has ever made pretense that what they're doing isn't like punk pop. I think they were one of the earliest bands to really perfect that. And while I could totally understand why people don't like NoFX, I totally get that, because it's like it is very like pop punk. I still have a soft spot for like Punk and Drublic because it's like it's a lot of fun, it's a lot of fun. They make kind of poppy punk, and that's like, I don't think they've ever pretended to not. Yeah, and Galen was saying they were more like F the revolution, we're the fringe, and we like it. Yeah, and the other thing is like, even if they are being supposedly revolutionary, if you're gonna make the claim, just be able to back it. That's all I'm saying. So we're gonna have some people with like these kind of vending tables that are kind of out here. Maybe we'll have some in the foreground just to kind of make it have some depth. Oh wow, it's already 10:51, you guys. So I might have to finish this. Well, I'll get further on this while I watch Mr. Hodges. And I encourage you guys, if you haven't yet, man, like Gary's a really thoughtful guy, and he's making great comics. And I think he's actually a really good example of kind of the type of thing I've been talking about, where I don't think Gary's running around saying that he's making this thing that revolutionizes comics, but he's making great comics. And he's taking a premise like dinosaurs versus Mars bots, which again is like, it's a corny B movie premise. And he's taking it and he's treating it with such reverence and just like solid writing skills that I would argue it's way more revolutionary than, half of the comics in this like movement that are just basically like carbon copies of Wolverine or something. That's the part that, again, and if you're carbon copying Wolverine because you love Wolverine, then good. Like, you know what I mean? But my point is, if you guys haven't yet, you should be listening and subscribe to Gary Hodges. I'm going to head over there in about 5 minutes. So I will probably, that's where I'm going to cut it, is at 10:58. Right now it's 10:52. So we'll see how far we can kind of get on this rough before then. But yeah, Gary's doing really great work. And also he's one of the most insightful and thoughtful people, that I've heard, like, just talk about his comics and stuff. I love his process and his thinking about comics. And I feel like of my friend circle, like even the idea I was just trying to communicate, if Corey Kerr were on here, he would be able to break down what I was saying in like a much more nuanced and thoughtful and very succinct way. Whereas I'm a person, I just talk a ton. And so like, I'll sometimes take something that could be a real simple statement, and it takes me like a year to kind of convey a very simple idea. So my point is, of my friends that are very thoughtful and really good communicators, I think that Corey Kerr and Gary Hodges are probably the most talented just communicators in general that I know. Gary's one of those guys. He like can articulate his thoughts on why he didn't like a movie or why he liked a movie, and it's in such a thoughtful and insightful and well well-structured way that it just it's admirable and really cool. But I also like his analysis of his own process. And so I never miss one of his live streams. So I'm going to be doing that at like around 11. What would be hilarious is if this is a day where, because I haven't really checked, if today is a day where he's actually moved to the live stream or isn't doing it, then I do apologize in advance. If you guys all head over there and then he's just like, yeah, I'm not really working on that. Okay. Let's see. We got some text we need to lay out here. Oh no. Okay, there we go. It's going to be, here's a question. Should I put the translation? I think that might actually be good. So this is going to be Buon giorno. Quanto? And I kind of want this to be a little further in. This is a rough, and the beauty of like doing these roughs is you kind of work out all the basics. Christopher Runciman said, "Great work, Joshua. It's fun to see your process. Thanks." Yeah, my hope is by the end of this weekend, I hope to have roughed out at least 6 pages. And that, like, if I can get these roughs done, then I'll be in a good position to do more kind of after. For now though, it's okay. Let me save. Maybe I can draw Wilson real quick. I just don't want to cut into Gary's stream. So Wilson. My wife was doing the Wilson soccer ball from volleyball. Did I call it a soccer ball? You guys, shame on me. I'm pretty excited about where this is going to head, though. I think that made John Coyote laugh, the Wilson.
I can't help it. Every time you say it, I think of it.
Either that made John Coyote laugh, or the fact that I called Wilson a soccer ball instead of a volleyball. I'm not sure which. I think both were pretty. I think definitely laughing at you because you're funny. I agree. Okay, guys. It's 10. Oh man, it is 10:57. So we almost got through the Wilson rough here, but we cannot cut into Mr. Hodges' incredible stream. I encourage you guys to go check it out. Oh, John Coyote said both things made me laugh. So that is sort of as I suspected. But yes, of course, my wife is way more funny than me. I'm funny because you're laughing at me. My wife is funny because you're laughing with her. All right, so here we go. We've got okay, it's 10:58. We got to end the stream, you guys. If you haven't yet, make sure you are following Mr. Gary Hodges on YouTube. I encourage everybody in the chats now to just bounce over to Gary Hodges' channel and watch his live stream, because he'll be starting in about a minute, and it should be super fun. So I hope to see you guys there. I'll probably hang out in the chats while I'm working, and then after he's done, I might live stream again while I'm working on thumbnails, and I'll show you guys my progress on it. All right, guys, have a good night and good day, and head over to Gary Hodges' stream. Bye.